Hello and welcome to colleagues from across the world. We're delighted that you're able to join with us for this session, one of our Stay Connected 20 webinar series for staff recruitment, retention and development during a crisis. We've had such an immensely positive response to this series of webinars, and it's our privilege to have had so many of you joining with us. Just a few housekeeping points before we welcome our speakers for today. Can I remind all participants to please keep your microphones on mute and your cameras turned off for the duration of the session. Due to the varying bandwidth in different countries, there may be intermittent issues with sound. If you do experience any difficulties with audio, please kindly check the sound settings on your device or try leaving the webinar and joining again. If you wish to leave the webinar at any time, please do so by selecting the red button for Leave Meeting. We want to be able to give you as much opportunity as possible to ask questions or share an experience. The best way for us to be able to do this is if you please use the online chat, making sure that you select sending your message to the host. That way we will be able to collate all of your interactions and follow up as necessary after the webinar itself. This webinar will be recorded and made available as soon as possible. Just a reminder to those who may find the live chat distracting, there is an option to turn off your view of this whilst participating in the webinar session. Move to the next slide, please. We're all aware to some extent of the impact that COVID-19 has had on our education. The statistics are stark and continue to be so, even though we're hearing of more and more schools reopening or preparing to reopen. As of 23rd of May, 68.5% of the global number of learners was still affected by school closure. And the narrative of the graph shown on the slide here is sharply focused in a time-lapse view provided by UNESCO. If we could just look at that time-lapse video to see the impact. We'll just switch to that screen. Thank you. We just scroll down a bit, Snea, to the graphic a little bit further down. That's great, thank you. And we press the play button there, and we can see on this time lapse global monitoring of school closures over the period of time. We can just press on that play arrow. Thank you. You see we're working through February and into March. And as we move from March into April, we see almost total lockdown globally. And then we start to see some reopening phasing in. That's the blue colour showing. Quite an extraordinary impact and quite a compelling view. You can access that through the UNESCO website. It's updated regularly. And we're just going through almost up to today. And indeed, we have gone up to the 28th of May, where you can see their total number of learners affected and 68% of the total enrolled learners with 150 countrywide closures. Thank you, Snare. If we could go back to the slides. We know too well that school closures carry high social and economic costs. As our schools transition into phased reopening, what impact are we seeing, and are we likely to see on the recruitment and retention of our teachers? And what part does professional development play in this? I'm delighted to welcome our presenters for today's session. Andrew Wigford, Director of Teachers International Consultancy, Nick West, International Principal at Nord Anglia Chinese International School in Shanghai, and Claire Sutton and Neil McRae from Fieldwork Education. We'll hear first from Andrew about the impact on teacher recruitment. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, hello. I hope you can hear me. I hope everyone else can hear me. Many thanks for that introduction, and hello everyone. I hope you've all been enjoying lockdown as much as I have. I hope you can hear me okay. I don't know if there's any indication from any of the organisers whether I'm okay. I guess you can tell
Andrew, we can hear you. We can hear you fine. Your sound is a little bit in and out, so if you could just be a little bit close to the mic, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, good. Yeah, so as Sarah mentioned, I run a company called TIC Recruitment, and we've been involved in international school teacher and leadership recruitment for around 15 years now. Before that, I worked with Fieldwork Education, in fact, as the IPC director back in 2002. And before that, I was a head teacher at the Vienna International School and a teacher at international schools in Germany, Colombia, and Austria. And I can confirm that we are in very strange times. So could you change the slide, please? Okay, so yeah, it's very strange times as far as recruitment is concerned, and for a number of reasons. Are we in a new normal, or is this a temporary glitch? I guess only time will tell. But we, as a company, have observed a number of key things happening right now. Could you change the slide again, please? Okay, so normally at this year, we, TIC Recruitment, would be dealing with literally hundreds of late vacancies from around the world. But it's actually pretty quiet out there. May is a time of year when schools often realize they need to employ extra staff because enrollment has increased. But at the moment, very few schools know what their enrollment is likely to be next year. In fact, many are expecting it to decrease as a direct result of the global crisis and job losses. So many, as a result of this, many schools have put their recruitment on hold. They are not able to recruit any new teachers, so we've seen a reduction in the number of vacancies that we would normally expect at this time of year. The other issue is that schools, which schools face at the moment, is in relation to work visas. Many schools daren't employ new staff because they can't guarantee they'll be able to get them visas. As we know, due to the COVID-19 situation, many countries have had to close their borders, and they're not issuing work visas to anyone. Even in countries where the situation is relaxing, we find that the visa offices everywhere are tightening up or slowed down to a halt. And of course, in most countries, it's not just about visas. Many countries still have their airports closed. So even if a teacher has a visa, they still are waiting to know what their travel plans are. In fact, many schools are preparing teachers for the fact that their first few weeks in school may be in a virtual school. I'm sure Nick will talk a lot about this later on in his specific example in Shanghai. There are still some schools recruiting, maybe because they have very reliable local student population, so they know what their needs are going to be. And for those that are still recruiting, I can say quite honestly that they're getting the pick of some really good candidates right now. We're working with schools across the Middle East, Russia, China, Italy, France, a few countries in Africa, as well as some countries in the Far East, and they're all filling their vacancies pretty quickly. One thing we've noticed, though, is that there aren't as many candidates applying for jobs as usual. We have a registration process and a database, and we normally see about 100 new registrations each week. And this is pretty constant throughout the year. There are peaks, but fairly constant. But in the last 3 months, in particular, this has been reduced to about half that. And the teachers that are registering are mainly teachers already in international schools looking for their next. And the biggest drop has been, we've noticed, in first-timers, teachers from the UK, America, or Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc. These places where you'd normally get quite large numbers, that has reduced significantly. And these teachers tell us that they they just want to stay where they are. You know, they're in their home country, and they want to stay there until they know more about how this crisis is going to unfold as close to their loved ones. Another thing we've noticed is that there are a lot of teachers who are much more nervous than usual about their next move. Those that have secured a new job have complained to us that they don't feel prepared and that their school is not giving them the information they need to make plans. You know, they still want to honour their contracts because they've signed a contract, but they don't know even now in May when they're going to get their work visa to start work in a few months' time. And this is, of course, a problem for the teacher and the school. It's not the school's fault, but some schools, I think, can do a much better job at keeping their teachers informed and in touch. And the uncertainty is taking its toll on current staff. In international schools also, we've heard that some teachers have lost their jobs. We've been working with some new schools around the world. In Moscow, for example, it's due to open in September, but now won't open because of lack of numbers. And this is the main virus. And the teachers that were employed, and the head teacher, in fact, are now looking for jobs again. And I would say,
Andrew, so sorry to interrupt you. We're having some audio problems. Is it possible for you to just move a little bit closer to your mic, perhaps?
I've almost got it in my mouth at the moment.
We thought that might be the case. Really sorry to interrupt, but a few people are just struggling. Please just continue. Thank you.
Okay, so I was going to say that if there are any HR staff out there listening to me, or any head teachers, members of the leadership team, I would advise that you really do all you can to reassure your staff, or your current staff, that they've got jobs. That's the existing ones, and also the ones that haven't arrived in post yet, the ones still in their home countries. There's a huge amount of anxiety out there. And schools, I think, will need to fight very hard to keep the teachers they worked really hard to find in the first place. I think that teachers who are in the process of looking for jobs should take part in the fact that there are lots of good jobs still available for August. And I think that this will be the case right up to the end of July and beyond. So I think that one result of this crisis that we're in will be that the recruitment period will drag on through the year, or carry on through the year. Those of you that have got new jobs to go to that are worrying about visas, I think the only advice I can give is to stay calm and realize that we're all in the same boat. It's the same in nearly every country right now. A message to leadership teams and HR managers: please do all you can to reassure your current staff, particularly new staff coming out. And just keep them informed, even when you don't have any news. Just keep talking to them. And if you do get the green light to take on any new staff at your school, don't wait too long to do that. There may not be as many candidates around later in the year, and you may have some stiff competition by then. So I hope you've heard some of this, or most of it. Good luck, everyone. I'm happy to take questions later on. Thanks for listening, and I'll come back to you later. So that's it for me. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm sorry about the audio problems. We're doing our best to try and improve things. Thank you for your insightful presentation. As you referenced, retention of teachers at this time is crucial, and I'm delighted to be able to invite Nick West to speak with us about this. Please welcome Nick.
Sarah, thanks. Hi, everybody. As you can probably read there, I'm the principal at NACIS in Shanghai. I've been there for over 2 years. Before that, I was in Vietnam and also Singapore. Used to be a regular Ofsted inspector in London. International for about 18 years, and a senior leader for about 12 of those. And I kind of want to go back to where my lockdown story began, which is about 4 months ago. Actually travelled ironically to a recruitment fair in London on the 18th of January. At one point, I thought I might actually have been carrier zero. We visited York with my sister for her 50th birthday. 2 days after leaving, the first case was announced in the UK, and it was in York. But it was a Chinese family visiting. But the situation certainly worsened in China at that time, and there was much conflicting advice about returning, and this was all during the Chinese New Year holiday. So myself, like all the other staff, we followed the UK and company advice to remain in the UK and not to travel. So we had to open the school virtually from February the 17th. The Chinese government actually been really good. They gave us such clear guidance that we weren't to start any new semester 2 material until March the 2nd, which gave us a bit of breathing space to kind of recap on learning and ease into how our systems were going to work for the virtual learning school. At this time, recruitment was progressing as planned, but it was slowing up quite considerably. Communication at this time was the clear challenge. Oh yeah, sorry, next slide, please. So communication was the clear challenge at this point. With the time difference, we were 8 hours at the time behind Shanghai, 7 hours now. So we tried to manage the timetables so that all the UK staff were teaching in the afternoon, all the national staff were teaching in the morning, but it was under constant review. Then it started to become clear with the UK worsening that actually travel back to Shanghai might be the best option. So we gave travel guidance as much as we could to our staff, but it was still their personal choice. I mean, with hindsight, I think all of those staff would say to you now, they wish they'd returned, because you can go about your daily business in Shanghai. Very different how it is in the UK. It was an epic journey back to China. Flew through Finland, Thailand, and then actually from getting off the plane in Shanghai, it was 22 hours to get to my home with all the testing and everything, which was rigorous and great, but it's not an experience I would recommend to anyone or would want to go through myself again. And then once back in the country, balance and communication was a daily focus. We had to, it's that really fine balance. You've got to maximise the learning experience for the students and their families, but you've also got to manage your staff, their expectation, and all of their well-being, of course. Messaging has been a real constant challenge, because of such a rapid changing environment. When I look back now on the early messaging, it was just irrelevant. So it wasn't clear for staff at all, and we were trying to gain information for staff, but it just takes time for decisions to be made. Things were just so unpredictable. Thankfully, the situation in China has improved dramatically. By April 27th, we were able to open to our exam years, grade 12 and grade 9. And then a couple of weeks later, grade 8, grade 10, grade 11. By May the 18th, grade 4 upwards, we're all back in school. So we were having to manage then online and in-school learning. So all the in-country secondary staff returned to school, and the normal timetables for offline and online learning were aligned. Next Tuesday is going to be a big challenge for us. We've got all grade 1 to 3 returning. It's another 700 children, something like that. So we're trying to maximise support from teachers that are still overseas. About 30 members of staff, which is over a third of our international recruits. We managed to gain support from one of our Nord Anglia international partner schools, but they're now opening. So that benefit has now gone. So we're having to look locally, trying to gain supply teachers. For a school, it's a really expensive time, actually. It's something that teachers don't really notice, but for leaders, we've still got the same salaries, the same rent, but the running costs have increased dramatically because of COVID-19. I think the biggest lessons from it is always have emergency planning in place. We've got a policy, but it wasn't there to be put into place. Communicate more frequently and more personally. Share information, even if there's no information. It's just good to contact with people, and just be proactive and have regular early deadlines in your schools. I mean, IB was really proof of this. They'd done all of their oral exams before the Chinese New Year, so actually we didn't have to request any extensions. But we've also had to work with IB to make sure that they're not discriminated against, because they've had the same online difficulties as others who've asked for extension, just because of the locations in the world that they are. So our current recruitment situation is, the staff overseas are trying to get back. So we're waiting for borders to open, visas to be handed out, residence permits, and then they've got to serve a quarantine when they get back. Very similar for new staff. They've got to get visas, wait for the border to open, have quarantine. And then for staff in country, we've had to issue a summer vacation travel advice recommending that they stay in country. So, you know, financial planning and resource reviews, we've done those, almost changed on a weekly basis. We need a really accurate picture of the staff that we need. You know, lots of families will be affected, even here. So there's an impact on numbers. You know, we're in a good position, and you know, we still have growth, but we're monitoring it on a weekly basis. It's a really important time for communication, you know, to keep interest from the new recruits, and also confidence in our current staff that their jobs are still there waiting for them, which they are. For any outstanding positions, we switched to in-country and local recruitment. That's become our main focus. So the event that I went to in January is called OTOS, Outstanding Teachers for Outstanding Schools. So we had our VOTOS, the virtual equivalent, which was really successful. We're also asking anybody in school who is leaving to stay, and we've had some uptake on that. So all in all, we're trying to maximise staff in country for the opening of the school in September, should the worst happen. But there are really positive government signs and collaborations between business, and we're trying to push that education. They become one of the people who are green laned into Shanghai, which would be fantastic news for us. So just to finish, you know, what might the future hold? And it's just for me a series of questions really, which I don't have the answers to. You know, how will international schools cope in the future? The numbers of students, how they're going to staff it? You know, what global big thinking could we have? How might the roles and the interconnectedness of institutes develop? Will the globe become smaller, bigger? Will there be more, less movement? And how do we retain more staff now and in the future? You know, and I think for me personally, it's all about valuing your teachers. They're the key in any school, and the children get the best experience if their staff, their teachers are intrinsically motivated. You know, you've got to have your purpose. You've got to have autonomy in your role, and you've got to have mastery of your subject. So training and lifelong learning is going to be a real key for everybody in the future, and hopefully retain more staff. So that's it from me for now. I'll hand back.
Thank you so much, Nick, for sharing with us your first-hand experience and ongoing challenges. And we're hoping very much you weren't COVID zero in York in the UK, but we're glad you got back to China safely. Investing in our staff is clearly a vital element of retention, as you say, and here to talk to us about how professional development is working at this time. Please welcome from Fieldwork Education, firstly Claire Sutton, and following Claire, Neil McRae. Claire, welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Sutton, as you can read on the screen there. I work within the professional learning and quality team at Fieldwork Education, predominantly working with schools in advising and organising on their training at this time. So if we can just go to the next slide. So I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how Fieldwork is supporting member schools during the lockdown period. So in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic, it became quickly clear that face-to-face professional learning would need to be put on hold. We have member schools around the world. Some campuses are starting to reopen and some are still closed with remote learning taking place. But there's still a really big need for professional learning for our members. So it's been vital that we've re-looked at how we can still support schools. You know, the schools that are starting their implementation, the schools that are welcoming new teachers into their schools, and those looking to develop their existing teachers. We've made a couple of key changes to our professional learning offer. Firstly, we have increased the capacity of our online courses. These are typically 3 to 4 week self-led courses with activities and discussion forums facilitated by trainers. We're now offering...
Claire, so sorry to interrupt you. I'm really sorry. We're having a few problems at the moment. Could you just make sure you're right in front of your mic for us? You're really clear at times, but we're just losing you a little bit.
Okay, I'll try again.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we've made a couple of key changes to our professional learning offer. We firstly increased the capacity of our online courses. These are the 3 to 4 week self-led courses with activities and discussions that are facilitated by a trainer. We're offering each curriculum-specific course more frequently and balancing the level of courses for the level 1 implementing courses and our level 2 embedding courses. You can find details of the schedule of when these are all happening on the My Fieldwork platform, or contact me and I can send you the details. For schools that are seeking in-school face-to-face professional learning, we've introduced an alternative model of delivery, which is our online blended model. If we can go to the next slide. So this is the structure of our online blended course. It combines one of the curriculum-specific online courses that I described a moment ago, but with the addition of 3 60-minute live and interactive sessions with an experienced curriculum trainer. This is to offer participants that real-time support and that tailored support so that the learning can be adapted and put in context to their own setting. So there are 3 modules combined with 60-minute live sessions scheduled after each of those modules. We found it was important to recognise that we're all working in a really different way right now. So we've tried to make the course option to be as flexible as possible in terms of timings. Schools can opt to condense this course into a week or shorter if need be, or schedule over a longer period of time, depending on how the school is working and whether it's the teachers are in school or whether they're working remotely. In the coming months, we're looking to organise regional online blended events. These will aim to support participants to learn with and from other member schools' experiences and in making those all-important connections and learning networks within each of the regions. So far, the online blended model is proving to be really effective. Neil, who is speaking after, facilitated our first online blended course. He was working with a school in India last month. He's going to share some of his experiences with you. Let me finish by just saying, if you have any questions or you want to talk about how we can best support you, feel free to contact me. My contact details will be shared with you, and there's a question and answer session afterwards if I can help then. Thank you.
Hi everyone, hope you can hear me clearly. My name's Neil McRae, as you can see, and I'm a consultant working with Fieldwork Education to deliver their courses. I've done a lot of work with them over the years, as you can see, from widely doing training to different audiences, both schools and larger groups of conferences and so on. What I wanted to do was to talk you through some of what I think are the key issues suggested, give a little bit of follow-up from the course that I ran, the online blended course for the school in India. So could we have the next slide, please? Ahead, let's move on to the next one and we'll see what we find. First thing is, I think that, as Nick was suggesting, he said, I think that lifelong learning is really a key for the future. And so one aspect of staff retention is ensuring that professional development continues even in these very different circumstances. And so the big question, of course, is what will it look like? Online learning supplant conventional training, and how can we make it effective? And I've put down a few things there that I think are really significant pointers for the future, and also an indication of what that perhaps face-to-face is sometimes less good at providing. The first one is customization, and there's huge potential for customization in online learning. It's very possible, obviously, the training is a good fit for the audience once there's initial contact and an indication of how we can customize the course for that particular group. In addition to that, what online often does is provide a wider network for teachers to access, often immediately. They are going to be working with and engaging with people perhaps from all over the world through that online. So automatically there are links to wider communities and forums. One of the key things that I think all online courses will need to ensure is that they have a high level of interactivity. We miss, of course, when we're on an online course like this, are all of those things that signal to us whether people are paying attention, whether they're enjoying what we're saying, whether they're assenting through nodding they're engaging in those different ways through body contact, through voice, and through all the things that we normally use in our everyday conversations. So we need to, in some way, ensure that we have that level of. So one way that we can do that in online courses is through more detailed peer feedback, more collaboration, and more sharing. And I've just put a reference there to the Education report, which emerged just a few weeks ago, and is well worth having a look at. It gives a clear indication of where online learning might be going in the future. And it's a very useful read, I think, for anyone either or indeed taking part in courses. I also think that online learning is something of a wake-up call, perhaps, for all of us. As you could see from my first slide, I've travelled quite extensively, and so I guess my carbon footprint is probably bigger than many people's. And it's a really salutary thing to recognise that it may be that I'm actually doing something rather more positive now, providing online learning rather than face-to-face learning. And of course, there's also perhaps the impact on individuals' personal health, whether you're a trainer or whether you're someone engaged in a course. If you're of the world, it's perhaps something that has an impact on your own health too. It may be as well that, in fact, it's not only a more responsible alternative, but it's also, of course, in many different ways, a cheaper alternative. I think those are some of the key things about how online learning is going to change the way that all of our training and learning take place. Next slide, please. Thank you. Some current concerns. The first thing is, what's working at the moment? Well, I think it's clear that online is here to stay. And so we need to plan on how we can improve the online learning quality. There are some key questions. Should it be pre-recorded? Does that work best? Many schools online learning with their students will have recognized that there are key differences between live sessions and recorded sessions for students. So it's a question of what is the most effective. Can we have a blended model, rather like the one that Claire was talking about earlier and that I've been involved with and we'll talk about a little bit more later? I spoke to somebody in a university in Ontario, Canada. Yeah, his view was that actually online learning not only has the potential to be as good as face-to-face learning, but it also could, in many circumstances, be actually better. There's an increasing amount of one aspect of research there, in fact, a very influential series of documents and research projects from Clark and Mayer, where they look at online learning, e-learning approaches, and how that relates to the ability of adults to focus on instructional learning. Finally, on this slide, I think we'd want to say that there's the potential for greater interactivity. Online learning, of course, as the teachers discover, is accountable. There's a level of accountability. Teachers have to complete certain activities in order to gain certification. And also there's that issue of value again. Online learning, partly because it's so easy to customize it, and also because it gives teachers time to not only follow the course live, but also use their own time. And I just emerged while I was waiting for this session to begin, and it's an article that will be in the Times Educational Supplement in the UK tomorrow. And it's a parent and an educational psychologist. And she's talking about her son, who's had a very powerful and impactful experience learning at home. And she said he's enjoyed online learning at school. And the reason is because he's been able to move at his own pace. He's had opportunities to follow up and explore and investigate further. And what we always say, of course, in learning, he's had time to reflect. So those are all areas, I think, where online learning has the potential to be either as good as, or indeed possibly better than face-to-face learning. And so the final slide, please. Okay, thank you. This slide is focused specifically on the training that I've been doing just over the last few months in India. And we've got some feedback from the teachers, and I've just popped some of the key things onto this slide here. And I'll just talk through some of the key areas that come. The first is that the live sessions that we had as part of the blended program were insightful as far as the teachers were concerned. And so it's a really good thing, I think, to course with a live session which allows teachers to perhaps have a face-to-face video contact with their trainer, but also to engage with their colleagues. This, of course, depends on the number part. In our Suchitra Academy course, we had just 12 teachers, and that's a reasonable number if you're using any of the online platforms like Zoom and so on. The second point is that really the online learning gives a great opportunity for what we would call a flipped learning model, where what we might have expected is the kind of work that's done at home becomes the kind of work that's done in class, and vice versa. The opportunity there is for teachers to have a level of deeper learning because they've got more time and their own time to spend on some of that more extensive reading that we might want them to be doing. And indeed, as you can see there, I've clarified my reading. I think teachers found the combination of both online opportunities to read when they were able to, and then having that supported by valuable. Next point, online learning has to be fun. It has to be something that at least attempts to replicate some of the key things, whether they're warm-up or ice-breaking activities, or whether they're group during a live session. And so we need to try and make sure that they are things that are engaging and as much as possible, giving opportunities for those people to participate. But, teachers always want, of course, in any kind of training is more. They'd like more materials, they'd like more advice, they'd like more guidance and more support. And so I think we need to look at new and different ways to follow. I'm very happy, obviously, to take questions at the end of this session. Thank you very much for listening to this, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Claire and Neil, and to all our speakers. We're going to take a few questions now. We've had a number of questions coming through, and I'd like to collate them. If you do have questions, could you please send them through live chat addressed to the host, and we'll be able to pick them up. Andrew, we've got a question, I think, that is intended really for you. The question is, are many schools who have offered teachers contracts and now having to withdraw them due to financial strains? If that is happening, how are you addressing recruitment for teachers who are perhaps now reaching a point where they're searching for roles at the last minute?
Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks,
Great.
Andrew.
Okay. Well, let me stress first that it's not a global, widespread problem. It's only we've only heard about it in isolated cases. So people needn't sort of worry too much that this is happening everywhere. It isn't. But as far as we're concerned, if any teacher comes to us and this has happened, we will definitely pull out all the stops to try and get that teacher a job. And as I mentioned before, the good news is that there are still quite a lot of jobs around in good schools. Not as many as there have been in previous years at this time of the year, but still a good number. So, in cases like that, we are very happy to help teachers and pull out all the stops to do all we can for them. Does that answer that question, do you think?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I think Nick, this kind of follows on from that, but is perhaps more focused towards the things that you were talking about. And I remember you said it's really important to share information even if there is no information. So the question is really, what are some of the things that you've put in place to ensure effective communications with staff during school closure or with new hires? And following on from that, how can you be confident about the staffing levels you need when you're not sure or a school isn't sure about how many learners might be returning?
Yeah, interesting questions. The one just following on from what Andrew was talking about, there are going to be jobs way beyond when they would normally be available, even after school started, I would imagine, because there'll be lots of teachers making different decisions, schools making different decisions. So if people do find themselves in that situation, I think they can still be fairly confident that they'll be able to find something. It kind of links into the second part of what this person was asking, the confidence of the numbers that we're getting right. So we do parental surveys. We seek just general feedback on the online learning, and it gives an indication of whether they're going to come back next year. And also a retention message goes out to parents to see their intentions for the next year. I know some schools actually send their fees out to collect them and see what fees they get in, but being in China, we're not allowed to do that until August. But it is a very stable and growing community. The reputation is still high. We can measure the number of inquiries we're still getting and track that in previous years, how many applications and how many are turning into actual enrolments. So all those numbers we use it's a daily basis actually that we're updating how we're looking. So we're fairly confident. Like I said, we're doing a weekly resource planning sheet for the number of staff that we need, and we've actually set it now. We've decided on the number of classes that we've got, and if anything, we've been very conservative with it. If anything, we will be one of those looking for some later last minute recruitment opportunities. Communications to staff, actually, if hand on heart, the reason I said that during the presentation was that on reflection, we have not necessarily been strong at it. Things that we've learned is, I think to actually do a visual message rather than send an email. So like a weekly visual, either whether it's a video sent that they can watch at a time, or just give the opportunity for staff to connect, because you get the same questions over and over again in email, and you find yourself answering individual emails rather than thinking, actually, then we've had 2 or 3 on that, we need to globally give those answers. For new staff, we've been trying to keep things as normal as possible. So we've sent them the school calendar for next year. We've talked about what might happen in induction, just to make it as normal as possible. And we're strategically announcing new key post holders to our own school community, our teachers, which gives the perception that things are ticking over as they should be. Like we did the heads, deputies, the head of boarding, different key positions, like week by week, so that the school still feels that it's growing and recruiting. And it's all that perception and confidence that we try to give. But really, the lesson learned, much more personal contact is essential. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. It was a very full and comprehensive answer to that one. I hope it's informative for the person who asked it. Andrew, there's a little bit of a follow-on to the previous question here, where teachers have gone through the recruitment process and the process has been initiated. Are there examples of employment being deferred until everyone is clearer about what's going on?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, I guess there have been some cases of that. I think the schools that are really pulling out the stops are those that are sort of giving very, very regular information, as Nick was saying, to their teachers on a daily basis about student numbers. They are gathering this information as we speak here. So every day the situation changes, and I think schools are just starting to reopen. Like here in Singapore, as you know, some schools start reopening next week, and as schools start to open, they will have more contact with parents. They'll have more indication of what's going to happen in the future, and that information will come in quite quickly. So I think when schools have committed to a contract, most people are committed to that contract. So teachers haven't got that to worry about. It's those where the schools are literally in a real state of flux at the moment, where they can't give real positive answers, where it's the most worrying situation for teachers. But, there's not a lot they can do about it at the moment, apart from some of them wait and do what Nick mentioned and gather as much information from the parents as they can to get that sort of verification that they'll need as teaching staff that they actually have employed. It's a bit of a worrying time for people. We understand that, appreciate it. But I think schools are doing everything they can to honour contracts and to get the teachers in to jobs which they accept.
Thank you, Andrew. Claire, this one I think is probably for you. A couple of questions about the online blended model of training. The question is, does the model have the same facilitator throughout? And is there support after the course completion?
Yeah, so the online blended course is supported by just the one trainer. So that trainer will take the participants through the online course and then facilitate the live sessions. So there's that continuity throughout. In terms of the support afterwards, there's nothing in place at the moment, but each school we could talk to in a different way, and we could start to develop a sort of bespoke program where there is that support afterwards. And there's the other options as well, that when we can do in-school training, perhaps that's an option, or there's further courses to take the learning to the next stage.
Thanks, Claire. And just to follow up to that one, how many people can attend the online blended course model?
They're open to up to 25 participants. So if a school has more, we're working with a school at the moment that has about 48 teachers. So we're running 2 courses in parallel with the same trainer leading both of those courses. So that, again, there's that continuity.
Right, thank you so much, Claire. Neil, I think this one probably is for you. There's a value placed on face-to-face training that has been there for a long, long time. We're learning a lot about it through having to move from face-to-face in schools, but do you think it's beneficial to move away from this and develop models, different models for online or blended? And a follow-on from that is, how do you think this will impact students and teachers' living in low income areas, how might they be factored in? And the purpose behind that question is people who don't have access necessarily to technology.
Okay, so let me take the first part first then. I think we are in a situation where obviously face-to-face training, if you like. But as I was indicating in the presentation, I think that online training and learning has its own set of values and may well be seen certainly as to be something that has not just as much value, but possibly even greater value. And that's just to recap for some of the reasons that I shared earlier. The first is that it's much cheaper for the schools involved. Is that teachers can undertake the course in their own time, at a time that's suitable to them. They can do it in different stages. If that's linked to a blended course where there is some live interaction, in a sense, they're getting the best of both worlds. So I think if we can, as will surely happen, improve on the quality of the online communication itself, bandwidth problem, we're going to find that online training becomes, I think, the norm rather than an exception. And the second part of the question was about schools in low-income areas. The point that I've just made, of course, online training may well be cheaper. The issue, I think, in low-income areas could well be technology. But of course, it's perfectly possible for online training to be delivered with nothing more. Smartphones are very smart in the sense that they're perfectly able to be involved in training programs. And in fact, quite some time ago, I was working on a European project that focused on online learning. And so I think we could be in a situation where with tablets and smartphones and the greater access to those, then online learning is not something for which teachers need to have a lot of technological, to the advantage of lower income areas for those two reasons. One, that it's cheaper, and two, that the level of technology required is actually relatively low.
Thank you, Neil. Claire, a little bit of a follow-up to the questions around fieldwork education training. The question is it certified? And is there a possibility for fieldwork training to be certified in some way?
At the moment, the courses are certified with a completion certificate, as long as all the activities have been completed. In terms of longer term certification, that's conversations that I guess we'll be having at Fieldwork Education over the next few months, as this is all fairly new structure for us.
Thank you, Claire. Perhaps I could just come in on that one as well, in that we are looking at ways of perhaps linking in fieldwork education training to the sort of CPD courses that are run in different countries by training organisations through teacher training universities, etc. So I think that's something we recognise there's a need for, and we're looking to develop and work towards. Just a couple more before we need to end today's session. Nick, you talked about searching for supply teachers and recruiting more locally. What's the impact of that on professional development needs in the school?
Yeah, well, because it's a short-term solution, but at the moment it's really just about their induction as good as you can do. So it's, you know, we're hopeful and lucky enough to get them in for a day or two beforehand so that they can do some shadowing, just find out the layout of the school. I can't say that it's, you know, we're considering their long-term professional development needs at this stage.
Thanks, Nick. And perhaps the last one here for Neil around training. Neil, how would you, or how do you differentiate training delivered for teachers who have English as an additional language or difficulty in accessing some of the material?
I think it's a really interesting question, actually, and it will certainly be an important one going forward. Obviously, at the moment, in terms of the new blended course, we've actually been doing that, as you heard earlier. Of course, English is the first language, although it may well be the first of a number of languages that most of those teachers will speak. That didn't stop actually some of the teachers on that course being concerned about whether they would be able to follow particularly. And I think there's two things that are probably worth saying here. One is that this comes down to the presenter themselves being familiar with the needs of those people who may be listening, have English as a second or even third language in their repertoire. The second is that I think there's the potential here through translation of documentation and translation of materials. Participants who may be less confident in English, or indeed may be taking this course in their first language with English supporting it. That may well be a development that we can undertake in future years as part. The second thing I think is that links to the issues of bilingual training, where we're able to offer training with perhaps one part of that in English and a follow-up to that in language that's being used. And of course, it's also worth saying too that given that there are opportunities in online training for teachers to access the materials whenever they choose, and also to, for example, go through live later on when they receive their link to a copy of that, it allows teachers to go over things again if they weren't sure when they were listening live. And so in many ways, again, the online training opportunities that face-to-face training doesn't.
Thank you, Neil, and many thanks to all of you for your questions and observations during the session today. We'll do our best to address any unanswered questions in the information sent out to you with the recording of the webinar. A sincere thanks to all of our presenters. Your insights have highlighted some key areas of consideration. Thoughts of recruitment may have been delayed or put on hold as other priorities demand attention, but it seems to be the message more broadly with COVID-19. We must balance risks and be prepared to take some. Don't leave recruitment issues too late was the very clear message from Andrew. Whilst looking forward in terms of recruitment, ensure that you're doing as much as possible to retain existing staff and those you may already have hired but have not yet relocated. In uncertain times, teachers will value the certainty from regular communication and active investment in their professional development and personal well-being. The longer-term impact of COVID-19 remains to be seen. There's much speculation about the sea change it may bring about in our whole approach to education. Ensuring that teachers and support staff are equipped and confident to deal with this through characteristic creativity and innovation is essential for the outcomes of our learners. For this, we must be continually improving our approaches to professional development. Thank you to all of you for participating today. We look forward to welcoming you to more of our Stay Connected 20 webinars running over the coming weeks. Nick, in his presentation, asked some big questions. How will international schools cope in the future? What global big thinking will we have? Well, do look out for an upcoming open mic session that we will be holding. There'll be information coming out about this. During this session, we're handing the mic over to you to share with us your thoughts and responses around those big questions. Please do contact me about any aspect of the learning today. My contact details are on screen, or indeed about implementation of our international curriculum. If you can kindly click on the Leave Meeting icon, we'll complete recording of this session. Goodbye and stay safe.